Part 1 as amended will stand part. Members, we now move to Part 2. This is debate on clauses 40 to 47, and the question is that Part 2 stand part. Call Chris Hipkins.
On the Part 2, can I just confirm with you that the debate on the schedules was all conducted under Part 1,
Correct.
if I'm correct. Thank you, Mr Chair. Part 2 is the consequential amendments to that are created by this Education Amendment Bill number 2, and it does result in amendments to the Crown Entities Act, the Education Standards Act, the Ombudsman's Act, the Privacy Act, the State Sector Act, the Early Childhood Education, the Education Early Childhood Centres Regulations, the Education Early Childhood Centres Regulations, both in 1998 and in 2008, and the Education Registration of Early Childhood Services Teachers Regulations 2004. And primarily what these amendments do is simply replace the, they do one of two things. They either replace existing references to the New Zealand Teachers Council with references to the Education Council of Aotearoa New Zealand, which of course highlights one of the follies of this legislation, which is renaming the body for no good reason whatsoever, and in fact against very popular opposition from within the sector who wanted to see the word teaching remain within the title of the organisation. This bill could have given effect to its desired changes without the need to change the name of the organisation, and therefore it wouldn't have needed, well, it is a waste of money, and therefore all of these consequential amendments wouldn't actually be necessary. That's right. Because the only reason these consequential amendments are necessary is because the name of the organisation has been changed against overwhelming opposition from the Teachers Council of New Zealand to the Education Council of Aotearoa New Zealand, thus resulting in changes to the Crown Entities Act, the Education Standards Act and the Ombudsman's Act. Now this is important because of course the Education Council of Aotearoa New Zealand does fall under the ambit of the Ombudsman, and I think that that's an important protection. It was also a specified agency for the purposes of the Privacy Act 1993, and I think that that's really important because of course the teachers or the Education Council of Aotearoa New Zealand does deal with a number of very sensitive and private matters, and they need to navigate that carefully. And of course issues around privacy have been quite contentious within the Teachers Council, which is now being replaced, and therefore ensuring that the Privacy Act continues to apply is important. However, I would note that throwing out effectively the existing organisation, the Teachers Council, and creating an entirely new entity, the Education Council of Aotearoa New Zealand, does potentially mean that all of that good work that's gone on in the last year or so, specifically around issues of privacy, could well be discarded and they'd have to start again. And I think that was one of the major criticisms that came out during the Select Committee process. But in fact, while the Teachers Council had a rocky start, it was improving and it was getting better. And privacy is very important, and there were very controversial issues that they were dealing with input from the Privacy Commissioner around what information should be disclosed around individual complaints, what should be withheld. The Teachers Council had a blanket suppression previously, and with a lot of public input, including from the Privacy Commissioner, they changed that so that there was more of a presumption of release of that information, and that is important. And so I think that in making these changes, the change in the name of the organisation, ensuring that that good work isn't just, this amendment shouldn't just simply slot a new name in for an old name. It should actually be, we should be focused, and the Parliament and the Government should be focused on ensuring that all of the good work that has been done by the Teachers Council around the issues of privacy are carried over to that new organisation, because while they have had some very challenging circumstances in the past, I believe that they've made significant progress on those matters in the last little while. The issue around the incorporation of the Education Council of Aotearoa New Zealand under the State Sector Act 1988 is also controversial because of the changing nature of the organisation. And so while the Teachers Council was also covered under the State Sector Act of 1988, the new Education Council of Aotearoa New Zealand, which will now also come under the ambit of the State Sector Act 1988, is different. because of some of the changes that have been made around issues like the Code of Conduct, because the teachers could now find themselves subject to codes of conduct issued by the State Services Commission under the State Sector Act, Mr Chair.
Chris Hipkins.
That relate to the entire public service. And I don't know whether that was the government's intention, but by simply replacing the reference to the Teachers' Council with the reference to the Education Council of Aotearoa New Zealand, taken in conjunction with other changes that this bill makes it could result, in fact, in the teaching profession being covered by state sector provisions that the government and the parliament didn't intend. So I'd like to get some reassurance that that's not going to be the case, and that what should be a relatively simple amendment doesn't actually have an unintended consequence of extending the ambit when taken in conjunction with other provisions in the legislation. Because I think it would be very unfortunate if the government was seen to be gagging the teaching profession in any way by bringing them under the provisions of the State Sector Act that previously had not applied to them. And that was a concern that was raised during the Select Committee process, and I think that reassurance would not be an unreasonable one for people to expect the government to answer to. So finally, just the other acts that are referenced here, the Education Standards Act of 2001. Of course, there's nothing substantive in that, because in fact there's very little substantive in the Act itself. That was the Act passed by the government after the amended by the government after the election. In 2008, and I don't think that that's going to make much difference. The Education Early Childhood Centres regulations, again, I don't think that there will be much substantive change there, simply from replacing the names. So overall, while these are technical amendments, there are still one or two issues that I think could be resolved there, ensuring that those Privacy Act issues are dealt with by the new agency, that we're not reinventing the wheel, ensuring that teachers aren't inadvertently covered by sections of the State Sector Act as a result of these changes, other changes in the legislation. Those are also important things, and I hope that the House can gain some reassurance on those.
Thank you. Members, we move to the vote on Part 2. First, we have the Minister's amendments to Part 2 as set out on SOP number 21. The question is that the amendments be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Party votes called for. Ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National.
60 in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
32 votes opposed.
Green Party.
13 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
11 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
2 in favour.
ACT New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Any other votes?
Could you just please repeat the Māori Party vote, please?
2 in favour.
Members, the ayes are 64, the noes are 56. The amendments are agreed to. We have Chris Hipkins' amendments to Part 2 as set out on SOP number 22 are out of order as being inconsistent with a previous decision. Order. Previous decision rejected by renaming the Education Council SOP number 22. We move to Catherine Delahunty's amendments to Part 2 as set out on SOP number 28. These are also out of order as being inconsistent with a previous decision which rejected the renaming of the Education Council SOP number 28. The question now is that Part 2 as amended stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. A party vote's called for. I'll ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National.
60 in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
32 votes opposed.
Green Party.
13 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
11 opposed.
Māori Party.
2 opposed.
ACT New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour. I'll be both here.
Any other votes?
Did he cast the vote?
Yeah, he did. In favour.
Oh, New Zealand's there as well.
I didn't see them.
They must cast their own votes. If they're in the House, they must cast their own votes. Just, look, there's a matter of procedure here. If a member of the party is in the House, they must cast their own vote. You can't have a whip for another party cast the vote. So, in this case, I'll ask the clerk to ask the Act what their vote is.
Act New Zealand.
One in favour. I didn't see him without his moustache.
No, it's all right. It's okay. Members, the ayes are 62, the noes are 58. Part 2 is amended, will stand part. We now move to Schedule 1. We have the Minister's tabled amendment to Schedule 1, new Schedule 19, Clause 1, replacing 31 December 2015 with 30 June 2016. The question is that the amendment be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Party votes called for. I'll ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National.
60 in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
32 votes opposed.
Green Party.
13 votes opposed.
New Zealand First. Māori Party.
2 in favour.
Act New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
Not one in favour.
Any other votes?
Members, the ayes are 64, the noes are 56. The amendment is agreed to. The question now is that Schedule 1 is amended, stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Party votes called for. Ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National.
60 in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
32 votes opposed.
Green Party.
13 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
11 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
2 opposed.
Act New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
One in favour.
Any other votes?
Members, the ayes are 62, the noes are 58. Schedule 1 is amended, will stand part. We now move to Schedule 2. We have the Minister's amendments as set out on SOP number 21. The question is that the amendments be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. A party vote's called for. Ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National.
60 in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
32 votes opposed.
Green Party.
13 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
11 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
2 in favour.
Act New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
One in favour.
Any other votes?
Members, the ayes are 64, the noes are 56. The amendments are agreed to. We have Chris Hipkins' amendments to Schedule 2 as set out on SOP number 22. These are out of order as being inconsistent with a previous decision which rejected the renaming of the Education Council. Catherine Delahunty's amendments to Schedule 2 as set out on SOP number 28 are also out of order as being inconsistent with a previous decision which rejected the renaming of the Education Council. The question now is that Schedule 2 is amended, stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. So, party votes called for. Ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National.
60 in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
32 votes opposed.
Green Party.
13 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
11 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
2 opposed.
Act New Zealand.
2 opposed.
Could I ask the ACT member to just cast his vote again, please?
1 in favour.
I thought he said opposed.
United Future.
One in favour.
Any other votes?
Members, the ayes are 62, the noes are 58. Schedule 2 as amended will stand part. We now move to Schedule 3. We have the Minister's amendments to Schedule 3 as set out on SOP number 21. The question is that the amendments be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Party vote.
Party votes called for. I'll ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National,
60 in favour.
New Zealand Labour,
32 votes opposed.
Green Party,
13 votes opposed.
New Zealand First,
11 votes opposed.
Māori Party,
2 in favour.
ACT New Zealand,
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
You got that wrong.
Any other votes?
Oh no, sorry, something else here. Members, the ayes are 64, the noes are 56. The amendments are agreed to. Chris Hipkins' amendments to Schedule 3 as set out on SOP number 22 are out of order as being inconsistent with the previous decision which rejected the renaming of the Education Council. Catherine Delahunty's amendments to Schedule 3 as set out on SOP number 28 are also out of order as being inconsistent with the previous decision which rejected the renaming of the Education Council. Members, the question now is that Schedule 3 as amended stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. No party votes called for. I'll ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National,
60 in favour.
New Zealand Labour,
32 votes opposed.
Green Party,
13 votes opposed.
New Zealand First,
11 votes opposed.
Māori Party,
2 opposed.
ACT New Zealand,
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Any other votes?
Members, the ayes are 62, the noes are 58. Schedule 3 as amended will stand part. Members, we now come to the debate on the clauses. The question is that clauses 1 to 3 stand part. Chris Hipkins.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and happy to take a call on this, the closing section of the committee.